Guten Tag. So, Dark Souls 1 is going to get a remaster, eh? Who would have thunk it? A lot of hype is surrounding this announcement, and for good reason. Not only is Dark Souls 1 obviously the point where the Dark Souls series began, spawning two highly successful sequels and bringing From Software to the attention of millions of gamers worldwide, it is also a fantastic game in and of itself, with the PvE portion being held in the highest regard by almost anyone who has played all the Soulsborne titles, second only maybe to Bloodborne, maybe. However, I won't be talking about that in this video. You know I'm all about PvP and thus we're going to talk about that instead. Admittedly, since the remaster isn't out yet and won't be until May 25, we can only speculate about things. But there are facts we can base those speculations on, and we can also talk about how we wish things to be, so let's do exactly that. Let's begin with what we do know about the remaster. It will release on all current-gen console platforms, PC as well as the Nintendo Switch. It will feature 60 FPS and 1080p support natively on all platforms except the Switch, and even offer an upscaled 4K resolution on the higher tier version of Xbox and PlayStation. More importantly for PvP, the 6-player multiplayer from Skull of the First Sin and Dark Souls 3 will be implemented in the remaster. There will be password matchmaking like we know it from Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3, and there is even talk about dedicated servers. Let's immediately talk about that last point, because I know a lot of you guys are pitching a tent on that thought. Unfortunately, I'm gonna have to disappoint you, but it's better to pull that tooth right now before you get your hopes up too much. I damn near guarantee you that the remaster will not have dedicated servers for the actual combat gameplay. How do I know this? I could go into a long-ass rant about how dedicated servers not only do not solve the problem of lag, phantom range, etc. and instead just introduce new problems, but also how a client-server model does not fit the way Souls games handle their multiplayer in principle. But I'm going to spare you that at this point in time. Instead, I'm just going to hint at the fact that we went through this whole thing 2 times already with Dark Souls 2 and 3. Both times dedicated servers was among the features listed. People went nuts, and then it turned out that this only applied to the matchmaking while the combat was still peer-to-peer. And that is exactly how it's going to be again for the remaster. They explicitly named this as a feature because the original Dark Souls 1 used peer-to-peer even for the matchmaking, and it was horrible. In this context, it absolutely makes sense to let servers take on that work, and this was already done in Dark Souls 2 and 3. It's not too difficult to introduce that feature in the remaster. Having servers handle the combat, however, would be a complete deviation from how things were handled in the past, and frankly, at this point I cannot imagine how this would even be supposed to work on a practical level. I'm not saying it could not be done, although there would be severe issues with that which would have to be solved, plus it would most likely not improve things at all, but instead make things worse in some aspects. But I'm saying the 2 developers who are realizing the port would have their work cut out for them, big time, if that was actually a thing. Which, again, it won't be. Servers for the matchmaking and peer-to-peer for the combat is a tried and proven way to handle multiplayer in Souls games. And I just cannot see them spending the time, money and effort for such a hypothetical, fundamental and highly questionable change. The next thing to talk about is 6-player multiplayer. Oh boy. I have to immediately say that I wasn't a fan of that feature when it was introduced in Skull of the First Sin. I continued to dislike it in Dark Souls 3, and I'm worried with a vengeance when it comes to that in Dark Souls 1. I just do not think the PvE portion of the game is designed for 4 players. A host and 3 phantoms will absolutely steamroll the game, even in New Game Plus 7. The whole balance of the game, with the HP pools and poise breakpoints of the mobs and bosses, goes straight out of the window. And thus, this goes especially for Dark Souls 1, which, unlike Dark Souls 3, was never designed for this number of co-opers. A mechanic like the effects of the Gravelord Covenant being applied to any world where the host has 3 phantoms could remedy that, but I highly doubt that something like this would ever be implemented. Even more importantly though, this will prove to be, let's say, interesting for invasions. Given that the mechanics won't change, we will talk about them in a bit. Invaders cannot use Estus in Dark Souls 1. And even if they could, Estus is slow as molasses in Dark Souls 1. I shudder at the thought of having to deal with 4 people at the same time chasing me down and having to heal with a humanity. How exactly is that supposed to work? And the same goes for preventing the host from chugging Estus to heal himself as well as his phantoms when his 3 phantoms are free to keep you busy. If you think invaders in Dark Souls 3 have it tough, the remaster might really give you something to chew on. And since we're talking about phantoms, let's address password matchmaking. Yes, I know, it's a godsend for duelists who want to connect with each other in their fight clubs hassle-free, I get that. But boy howdy does it suck to invade a world where the phantoms are so level 500 who can each cast 10 Crystal Soul Spear while wearing full havels and being able to swing their Zweihander 6 times in a row and still have enough stamina to double roll away after that. The good thing in the context of the remaster, however, is that in the original Dark Souls 1 you invaded up infinitely anyway. So you could invade as a soul level 20 into the world of a soul level 387 host, and there would be no downscaling on him or his phantoms whatsoever anyway. So even though the downscaling with the password matchmaking doesn't really work properly in Dark Souls 3 at least, it could actually be a slight improvement in the remaster. We will have to see. I have to say though, the prospect of the chaos 6-player multiplayer will cause in Darkroot Forest makes me giggle in excited anticipation. So those were the things we do know something about already. What about the things we have no knowledge about yet? You know, the game mechanics when it comes to PvP. Man, is there a lot to talk about here. Even if you haven't played Dark Souls 1 yet yourself, you probably have heard about the instant backstabs, or the poise system that not only allows you to easily stack a lot of poise, but which also makes you completely immune to being staggered even when you're using a fast weapon and when you're not in an attack animation. Or the mind-boggling amount of advanced techniques like toggle escaping, dead angling, backstab escapes, ghost hits, moveset swaps, perfect blocks, etc. All of which being based on glitches in the game engine. All this is where the community is deeply divided. One half loves the game exactly for those features, which are largely absent in later titles. The other half completely despises it for them. I'm beyond thrilled to see how things will turn out in that regard in the remaster. I have no knowledge about this, and no one else aside from the developers does, so I can only talk about my personal stance on it and what I think might happen in that regard. And I have to say I'm extremely torn on this one. On one hand, as the footage you're seeing shows, I suck at this game. I used to be decent back in the day, but after 4 years of not playing it, all of that is lost, and I find it extremely difficult to handle some of the mechanics, which kinda puts me into the shoes of someone new to the game. And the implementation of some of the mechanics like backstabs and poise, as well as some of the techs that PvP hotshots use, do give you quite a bitter pill to swallow at times if you are either new to the Souls series or coming from Dark Souls 3. On the other hand, however, hearing rumors about the glitches exploited by some techs being fixed and mechanics such as backstabs and poise potentially being adjusted does worry me for several reasons. One reason is that the PvP in Dark Souls 1 is far from perfect, but it is a stable ecosystem of powerful intended mechanics, as well as equally powerful glitch-based techs to handle those mechanics. Let me give you an example of what I mean. Dark Souls 1, unlike Dark Souls 2 and 3, has infinite hit stun, just like Demon Souls had. If you get staggered by an attack, you're stuck getting hit until your opponent's stamina runs out. Swapping your equipped weapons with the D-pad, however, lets you get out of that stun lock, a technique called toggle escape. Were it not for that glitch in the way the game prioritizes animations, this game's PvP would be an utter shit show. The player who gets the first hit in and poise breaks his opponent would simply be the winner by default in 9 out of 10 cases. Taking out just one aspect of this ecosystem would have drastic consequences for all other aspects. If they started doing that, they would have to basically revamp the game mechanics completely, from the way backstabs work, to the effects of poise, to the hit stun properties, and the list goes on and on and on. And this is the second reason the rumors about potential changes worry me. If they actually do attempt to rebalance the game, this would be a massive undertaking. And there is little reason to believe they get things right immediately. Which would mean the game would depend on comprehensive patching to fix all the issues that will present themselves. Will Bandai Namco spend the money for that? Will the developers be competent enough to find the appropriate solutions? Doubtful, since both developer studios have no experience with balancing a Souls game. At the end of the day though, I'm reasonably certain that with regard to the mechanics, not much if anything is going to change. Let's be real here. Companies such as Bandai Namco and the developer studios responsible for the remaster are naturally greedy and just want to earn money the easiest and most efficient way. That's what companies do. And with them having their hands full with getting the remaster to just work on current platforms, and with all the effort they are likely putting into the graphical side of things, I just can't see them touching this hot potato that is game mechanics and PvP glitches, not with a 10-foot pole. Again, pure speculation on my part, but that's what I believe will be the case, or rather not the case in terms of substantial changes to the game mechanics, intended or unintended. So let's say I'm right, and apart from properly working matchmaking and better graphics, nothing will change. Where does this leave us with regard to PvP? Well, buckle up, sunshine, because if you're not already proficient in Dark Souls 1's PvP, you will be in for a rough time. Dark Souls 1 does not go easy on you at all, and the tiniest mistakes you make in PvP will be punished harshly by the many hotshots there are and will be. I'll leave a few helpful links in the description to get you started, but at the end of the day, you will have to try and fail a lot until you stand a chance. I know I will pick up Dark Souls 1 a lot more often until the release of the remaster to at least brush some of the rust off. How about you? What do you think might happen with the PvP in the remaster? What do you wish for? Let me know in the comment section. Take care, folks. Niff out.